And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcia Hovey. I'm chair of the board of CADRE, which is Collaborating Agencies Disaster Relief Effort. CADRE is a network of nonprofits in Santa Clara County who help to restore the community following disasters. Today's webinar is being presented through partnerships with the Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits and the City of San Jose. So from all of us, welcome to this very important webinar. 9 months ago, when this pandemic started and we all learned the word Zoom. And over the course of the 9 months, we're becoming more and more skilled at actually creating those virtual meetings. This new meeting format has uncovered deficiencies in our ability to be inclusive of our community partners who are visually or hearing impaired or have other accommodation needs. CADRE has been testing different tools to improve accessibility, and we recognize that we're not the experts. So we're bringing in the experts so we can all benefit from their knowledge and advice. And please don't think that this webinar is a perfect example, because it's not. We're still finding challenges. We're still trying to figure them out, but we are committed to getting better each time we meet. This presentation is being recorded, so it can be a reference as we continue with our virtual meetings going forward. The recording and PowerPoint will be posted on the CADRE website under programs and events. You can also save the chat if you need to review that later. We have a very full program, so in order to get all of our questions answered, please type them into the chat. The presenters will try to answer the questions when they're not speaking. And if we get too many questions to answer them live, we'll create a frequently asked questions and share that with the group. Anna and I will be posting links in the chat that you can copy or download later with more and more resources. And now I will turn this webinar over to our lead trainer, CADRE's lead trainer, and the facilitator for today's webinar, Anna Swardensky. Anna?
Thank you, Marcia. So good afternoon, everyone. And on your screen today are the objectives for today's session. They are as follows: to provide a forum for our nonprofit and community programs to learn about the importance of making our virtual meetings accessible, to share information about tools, plugins, and other apps that are being used to make sessions more accessible to people with different abilities, and to hear from populations impacted and service providers, all of you, on what it means to have full and inclusive access. So we're going to keep going forward. The way we have designed today's program, we just are finishing up our welcome and introductions. If you joined us late, you'll see in the group chat, if you could please enter your name and the organization you represent so that we can connect with all of the folks that are joining. We had a very large interest list of registrants, and we're excited to see you all here today. We're going to kick off this afternoon with a few words from our state and federal partners on why accessibility is important, and something called Section 508. We're going to walk you through some meeting accessibility protocols that have been developed here in Santa Clara County. And then we're going to talk about some tools and apps and resources that are commonly being used over the last 6 to 9 months, and some tips and ideas about that. And closing out our speakers and presenters is Nothing About Us Without Us. We have a few consumers that we've asked to join us for today's dialogue, and then Marcia will close out the program, all within the next 90 minutes. So as we said, we've got a lot planned, packed in for you, and we're going to move to our first speaker. So we have invited this afternoon Vance Taylor to join us. We're really excited. We haven't seen Vance in almost a year. Vance is the Chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. He's responsible for ensuring the needs of individuals with disabilities and persons with access or functional needs are identified before, during, and after disasters and integrated into the state's emergency management systems. We've invited Vance to kick off this topic for us. So take it away, Vance.
Hey, thanks, appreciate it. And you can tell, see that if you look at the photo right there, that's my pre-COVID hair. And now these luscious locks is my quarantine look. So, you know, before and after, we'll see what it looks like a few months from now. But anyway, it's good to be with everybody virtually. I think that you're right. You know, several months ago, it was like, Zoom, what is that? And now it's like Zoom. It's just part of the lexicon. So, you know, as I just think about this topic, and I appreciate being able to spend a few minutes. Anna had said 35 minutes, so I'll try and go there. I'm kidding, 3 to 5, I know. Just like to, you know, keep Anna on her toes there. Let's think about this issue, and the reality is this: that, you know, a key component of the emergency management process is communication, right? Communication is always important, but during disasters, the ability to provide people with information that's clear, that's approachable, understandable, and accessible, right? Information that's effective is not just nice. It's sometimes the difference between life and death. When we think about the emergency management landscape, we're providing meetings now that enable large numbers of people to come in to get life-saving information. And sometimes that's, hey, there's a fire and you got to go. Or it's COVID and you got to stay home. And if we're not doing that in a way that's accessible to our whole community, then we're creating gaps. And those gaps in our response and our operations and in our recovery will sometimes be measured not just with an increase in human suffering, but also sometimes with an increase in loss of life. And so we have to keep that in mind. We all come at things from our own perspective. So if you can hear, if you can see, then you assume that other people can hear and see. But the reality is, the messages we put out, the information that's delivered through these virtual meetings is literally going to fall on deaf ears, right? We're going to put information in front of individuals who are blind that can't see it. And rather than say, well, I'm sure they'll figure it out, or good luck next time, what we have to do is recognize that there are very clear, straightforward, simple ways to get around these barriers. If you are somebody that wants to put information out, right? If you're a comms professional or a PIO, you want your message and your information to go as far and as wide as possible. And when you think about the landscape of California, you've got you know, at least 10 million people to identify as having a disability. That's a lot of people to cut out of an information process, right? That's a lot of people to leave hanging when it comes to knowing what an emergency is, what they should do, where they should go, what actions to take to be safe, secure, well, and independent. And so we can't take that risk, and we don't take that risk. And what you're going to hear about today are tools and resources, ways that we go about making sure our meetings are accessible. And it's none of this is rocket science, right? So keep that in mind. And thanks for letting me be here. And thanks for making things accessible. And thanks for the work you do. Be well, be safe.
Thank you, Vance. We want to remind you that we're going to use the chat box feature today. If you have questions along the way that you'd like to put in for the speakers or your peers that have joined today's program. As this quote in the upper right-hand corner of the screen says, make a beginning. It's okay not to be perfect. It's not okay to not try and just pretend that it doesn't matter. We want to call out one note, as Marcia said in her introductory remarks. We know that as we prepared for today's session, that we learned that the chat box feature that many of us have grown very accustomed to using, it actually presents some challenges for participants who use screen readers, as the chat essentially talks over the speakers and presenters on a Zoom call. We also know that this is an important way of sharing information as part of these virtual sessions. So we have made the intentional choice to utilize this feature in today's program. We will be putting together a resource list and sharing any of the information on the chat. And if you are using a screen reader and are having any difficulties with that, please direct message or email Marcia or I, and we'll do our best to support you in the background. And so with that, I'm going to keep going to our next speaker, which is Roxanne Crawford from our FEMA Office of Disability Integration. And she's here to share with you a few words about something called Section 508. But before we do that, I have two questions for all of you. If you could go to your Zoom reactions button and give us a thumbs up if you've actually heard of Section 508 before. And using your same Zoom reactions feature, if this is something new to you, give us the hand clapping, because you're going to learn something new today. So just wanting to see on screen and give our presenters a little bit of info of who's joined us today. All right, Roxy, let's have you take it away.
Hey, everybody. I'm Roxanne Crawford. I'm FEMA's Region 9 Disability Integration Specialist. Just a brief, Region 9 covers California, Arizona, Nevada, Hawaii, and all of the Pacific territories, CNMI, Guam, and American Samoa. I've been deployed for COVID specifically since March, so it's been quite a while that my focus has been really on COVID, and that does include Zoom and all of these virtual meetings and trainings and the things that we've now been doing electronically. Which brings us to Section 508. Section 508, it was made part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 in 1998. It requires federal agencies to make electronic information technology accessible to people with disabilities. That could be things like the captioning at the bottom of the screen, ensuring that everything is what we call 508 compliant. Like if you have a picture in a document, making sure that that has an alternative text. So when a screen reader gets to it, it doesn't just say it's an unidentified object. There was a refresh in January of 2017, and it updated the accessibility guidelines and requirements for information and communication technology, and also telecommunications. It also reorganized Section 508 and Section 255 guidelines to better align with and reflect recent technology innovations, things like social media and the way that we utilize information sharing much differently in 2017 through present than we did in 1998 when this became a law. You could go to the next screen. Sorry, let me click there. There we go. So who needs to be 508 compliant? I know on the last slide we said it's a law for federal entities, right? So you're thinking to yourself, how does this apply to me? It doesn't just apply to federal agencies. It could also impact any company, organization, nonprofit, any of those groups who do business with a federal agency. If you're utilizing federal grant funding to produce an event like today, then it would need to be fully accessible to individuals with disabilities because that funding is coming from a federal entity. That includes private contractors, financial industry, healthcare, legal organization, lots and lots of different groups that serve individuals with disabilities and interact specifically producing materials for anyone in the general public. There's kind of this preconceived notion that individuals with disabilities, wouldn't be participating in a CERT or an emergency management response call, but within a lot of the emergency management community, and it's just not true. Individuals with disabilities participate and interact in all areas of life. And so it's important to make sure that the information we're providing is inclusive. You can go to the next slide. To learn more about 508, there's a number of different organizations and groups that you can look at. The Pacific ADA Center offers classes, and yes, a lot of those classes and courses, trainings, you do have to pay for, but they offer so many services and support services after those trainings. If it's something that you're doing a lot of and you're producing a lot of documents or doing a lot of public meetings, it would be worth your while to investigate the Pacific ADA Center and see what types of resources they have available. There's also, you can see the website on the slide, and I am absolutely certain they're going to post it in the chat for everyone to be able to click on it. And that's the section 508.gov about us. And really, it's got some interactive icons and things that you can utilize to look at more specifics about section 508. It can get a little overwhelming to kind of dive in head first and think, gosh, you run just a simple 508 checker on a document or on a PowerPoint presentation and realize I've got 58 mistakes and I don't know how to fix them. These websites are really useful for kind of getting you started in understanding how to make those changes. So check out the resources and keep Googling and looking. And again, Pacific ADA Center is fantastic for being able to reach out to someone who can guide you in the right direction for what you're looking for personally. So, thank you for having me. I have had a great time kind of delving more into our general 508 stuff.
Great. Thank you, Roxy. And please, folks on today's call, take advantage of the fact that we have Vance and Roxanne with us today. If you have specific questions for our state and federal level representatives, please put those in the chat or raise your hand if you need Marcia or I to take you off mute. Let's keep going on our program for today. Next up, our speaker is Sherry Burns, the Executive Director of the Silicon Valley Independent Living Center. Sherry is also one of our founding CADRE Board of Directors members. She is here from, she's a San Jose native and has worked in independent living and disability services for over 35 years, with 20 of those years in experience as an executive or deputy executive director. She, prior to working here in San Jose with SVILC, she was the executive director at the Community Resources for Independent Living in Hayward, and she has extensive training in disability rights and laws, ADA access standards, disaster services, focusing on access and functional needs, and she chairs one of our local committees here. So Sherry, go ahead.
Thank you, Anna. Again, this is Sherry Burns with SVLC and CADRE, and I'm going to be covering basic meeting access protocols. Silicon Valley Independent Living Center is the co-lead with the San Andreas Regional Center for CADRE's Access and Functional Needs Function Team. We also refer to it for short as AFN. So that's a term you can get used to, Access and Functional Needs, AFN. And a few years ago, CADRE's AFN team partnered with the county's public information officer to create an AFN work group made up of community-based agencies, government emergency managers, neighborhood groups, and disability advocates. We meet regularly to address and integrate AFN solutions related to emergency preparedness and response. This past year, we have focused mainly on the pandemic, but also on public safety power shutoffs or PSPS events, the fires, and how we can improve our community response to be more inclusive. Part of our discussions led to our own realization that we were not being as inclusive as we needed to be with online meeting access, especially as our group expanded. Therefore, a subcommittee met to develop access meeting protocols, which we are now implementing. However, creating accessible meetings is always a work in progress and evolving. The meeting attendees change along with their needs, and the technology changes, of course, requiring us to keep assessing if we are being as inclusive as we can be. There is no one size fits all approach. If you get anything out of this discussion today, it's that planning for meetings is essential for audience inclusion and success. And planning begins with asking, who is your audience? If your audience is the public or even a large focus group of colleagues or friends, there will surely be participants with access needs. So we begin with planning for basic access needs, then asking what the participants will specifically need in order to fully participate. Let's see what that looks like. Next slide, please. So there are 4 parts to the protocols: planning the meeting, preparing virtual invitations and presentations, during the meeting, and then additional resources. Anna will attach the link to the document in the chat box, and we will be posting the full document on the CADRE website along with the video recording of today's session for reference. The protocols we developed is divided into these 4 parts that are listed here, and we will walk through each one of these 4 sections now. Next slide, please. Planning the meeting. First, designate one person as your disability coordinator for the event. Strive to include people with disabilities in logistical and program planning. Budget for accommodations such as a certified American Sign Language or ASL interpreter, or more than one interpreter if your meeting's lasting longer than 30 minutes. Stage lifts or ramps for in-person meetings, and signage and materials in alternative formats for both in-person and virtual meetings. Check that the online meeting features you are using support accessibility. All the controls and features should be fully accessible through the keyboard without requiring a mouse. And all controls and features such as the chat, screen sharing, polls, and question and answer features should be accessible to people who use assistive technology like a screen reader software. Keep in mind that some participants may still not be able to use these features or may be calling in on the phone. So have a plan for how to engage and include them in all discussions. The online meeting tool should provide the possibility to use real-time captioning and sign language services. The online meeting tool should also provide the possibility to connect using a phone line and not just voice over IP services. Next slide. Okay. Section 2, preparing the invitation and presentation. Let's see. Include detailed step-by-step instructions of how to get on the event and how to use the platform you're using. Ensure that your fonts are easy to read and the text is large. Sans serif fonts are preferred. And also make sure that your slides have good color contrast, like black on white, white on black, yellow, a bright yellow on blue. They should be very high contrasting. Do not use dark blue on a light blue background, for example. Be mindful of jargon and slang and assumed knowledge to be inclusive of all your attendees. If you're using acronyms or abbreviations, make sure that you state what those are clearly, the full term, and if necessary, define the term. Use plain and easy to understand language to, again, be inclusive of all audiences. Avoid ableist and other negative disability language. People with disabilities are always people first, not their disability label. Ensure your slides are uncluttered and consider using images to help explain concepts. If you use images, as Roxanne mentioned earlier, include alternative text and/or image descriptions. These are features that are very commonly used in Word and other programs as well. So just make sure that you either have an alt text assigned to the image or graphic, or else underneath in parentheses, state what the description of that particular image, so a screen reader can understand it and verbalize it for the person who's using the screen reader. Next slide, please. The next section is your presentation. Do not use flashing or strobing animations in a presentation or other materials you and other event organizers are creating. If you are including material that already has strobing or flashing features, such as showing of a film or television show, remove the strobing from the original material or skip that portion of the material. If you absolutely must include something that has flashing or strobing, which again should really be avoided at all costs, then you must ensure you put a very clear warning in place before showing the material, as strobing may cause seizures. If you're sharing pre-recorded video, be sure to describe what's happening in the video, and again, add captions using programs like Final Cut or Adobe Premiere, or apps like Clip-O-Matic, Clips, Caption This, and AutoCap. In a few minutes, Ron Halog will be covering more information about apps. If you're uploading the video to YouTube, you have the option to use automated captions and then edit those captions to fix any errors before publishing. Hire a professional to write captions for your videos using websites like Rev, Otter AI, which we are using today, Alternative Communication Services, and ASL Captions. Hire a professional to provide sign language interpretation. You can find ASL interpreters using resources like the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. Again, all of these links and resources will be posted on the website and sent out as additional resource materials after this presentation. Hire a professional providing real-time captioning through vendors such as National Captioning Institute, Caption Access, and StreamText, especially for webinars and other events where speakers will be interacting with attendees and answering questions in real time. The invitation and presentation, continuing. The invitation for the online meeting should include the meeting link, meeting ID, and meeting password. A list of phone numbers for participants to dial in to access the meeting audio, and also include a one-tap dial-in option for those who cannot easily remember or manipulate a large string of information in a short amount of time. Or the sign-in function has a timeout feature. The one-tap number should resemble 1-800-XXX-XXXX, and then a stream of numbers with a hashtag or pound sign. This strategy will work with any phone. A meeting agenda in accessible format should be used. For example, Word document or text or rich file text, or embedded in the email content, not in an image. If you have words in an image, again, the screen readers will not be able to read the contents of that image. A request that participants ask for any needed accessibility accommodations so as to allow the meeting organizer time to plan ahead. Include a list of accommodations such as real-time captioning, sign language interpreters, and documents in accessible formats. Request that accommodations are submitted within 5 business days of the meeting to allow you the opportunity to obtain ASL and other alternate formats. And there's just a really sample, a short checklist sample there that's included that you could have going out in your email to your participants when they're signing up. So that checklist includes captioning, sign language interpreter, large print materials, advanced copy of slides to be projected, and then other specific to your particular presentation. And then send out the materials ahead of time if requested. Next slide, please. Continuing on with the invitation and presentation. As I mentioned, send out your materials ahead of time if requested. Provide a link to a list of the accessibility features and keyboard shortcuts for the online meeting tool. For example, if you're using Zoom, their accessibility features are listed at https hyphen, colon //zoom.us/accessibility. So if you go to zoom.us/accessibility, you can find their accessibility shortcuts and meeting prompts. Ask participants to familiarize themselves with the online meeting tool, including the chat or raised hand feature. And as we started this morning, Marcia went over some key protocols as well. Avoid using the chat feature whenever possible, but if not possible, ensure that everyone, including those on the telephone, can participate. Assign someone to monitor the chat and Q&A and revoice any text for those not using the web page or unable to read the entries. Presenters should describe what is on the screen, especially images and photos. If needed, the moderator should assist with this if the presenter is unable to do so. Don't rely on one person to be able to do all of these things as a facilitator. It's important to separate out the roles and responsibilities again for a successful meeting. Now, during the meeting, make sure your audio is clear. Poor audio quality can make it hard for people to access the event and/or use apps that can help reduce background noise on calls, such as the app CRISP, K-R-I-S-P. Have your speakers use a headset whenever possible, if this is accessible to them, to improve the audio sound. Again, it eliminates extraneous noises. Hosts and presenters should use a quiet room where they won't be disturbed whenever possible. I know during COVID times when we are sharing our homes often with other family members, kids, spouses, and others in our pod, that sometimes is extremely difficult to do, to have a quiet area. In that case, again, the headsets or the ear buds help tremendously with that. Hosts and presenters should use a quiet room. I mentioned that. Mute all attendees, but those speaking, to keep background noise to a minimum that attendees can easily hear. And if participant introductions are being done, ask each participant to introduce themselves to the group. Provide preferred pronouns to use when addressing them and offer a description of themselves. For example, my name is Sherry Burns and my preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am an older, middle-aged white woman with short brown hair and am wearing a blue sweater and multicolored scarf. Again, continuing on during the meeting, participants should indicate if they have any access needs for the meeting that are not being met. It's always a good idea to start your meeting that way as people are introducing themselves, as I gave the example before, and I could say at the end, my access needs are being met, or if they are not being met, to state what those access needs are. When speaking at any time, participants should restate their name, as I mentioned. This is Sherry, and I agree with that last statement shared by Joyce. This is helpful for any participants who are blind or low vision, as well as for the interpreter if being used. You can find additional resources through Cal OES. There's a meeting checklist that's included on this slide and will be in the chat room, as well as in the documents that will be sent out after this webinar. Additional resources can also be found at the Universal Design Approach Online Meeting Accessibility Toolkit. And a lot of these materials were accessible through some excellent documents and information put out by the organization Rooted in Rights. And the information can be found at Rooted in Rights, How to Make Your Virtual Meetings and Events Accessible to the Disability Community. Again, there's more. We'll be sending out these protocols with the list of full resource links after today's session to all registrants. And they will also be posted on the CADRE website found at CADRESV, cadresv.org. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Anna.
Thank you, Sherry. I know that was a really lot of information in a short amount of time. And so, as we said, we will be sending this out to all registered participants, the actual meeting protocols document, and it is already posted on the CADRE website in that programs and events tab, as Marcia mentioned. So moving forward to our next segment of the program, I want to sharing with me on this segment is Ron Halleck. Ron has been in the nonprofit world for over 35 years, assisting and supporting people with disabilities and the community. For the last 15 years, he served as the executive director of 2 nonprofits in the Greater Bay Area. He's been a trainer and instructor for over 30 years and currently serves as the president of Alameda County's Developmental Disabilities Council and as the vice chair of our sister VOAD in Alameda County. Ron is currently employed at the Independent Living Resources of Solano and Contra Costa counties as their emergency preparedness coordinator. And what we wanted to start off with today for this segment is video conferencing apps. We know everyone is making use of a lot of different apps that can help us to maintain connection and community online, even if we are unable to gather in person. So the question comes, how accessible or usable is the app will depend on the person's using it and their own individual access requirements. As we noted today, we are offering live captions. What are live captions? They're the automatically transcribed words that appear either at the bottom of your screen as subtitles, as closed captions, or as automatic video captions. With the onslaught of artificial intelligence technology, live captions are available at a relatively inexpensive rate, but it does have limitations, as we noted, and as you may be watching in your own screen today. They're often not perfect, and the quality does vary according to the provider, which was precisely why we thought it would be interesting to see 2 different captioning services running at the same time. So if you want to have the Otter window up on a separate browser and open up the transcript window in your Zoom, you'll just be able to see how 2 different software applications for AI transcription works. Live transcriptions or live captions work best for one-on-one meetings or small group conversations. They will become less accurate if there are more people, more voices, and noise added into the call. The automated caption technology often struggles to pick up strong accents or speech impairments, so be conscious and aware of that. Some platforms also allow users to add captions created by a human transcriber, as Sherry mentioned. And so with that, what we did for today's session is we took a look at a number of the video conferencing apps that many of us have grown accustomed to using today. So there's a lot of different services by a lot of different entities. Some are better than others with their accessibility considerations. On the screen, we list a number of the apps that we've seen grow in popular use over the course of this pandemic. And for those of you on the phone or listening into today's session, the slide lists Blackboard, Blue Jeans, Google Hangouts, Hangouts Meet, which is a part of the Google for Business package, Microsoft Teams, Skype, Skype for Business, WebEx, and Zoom. And I'm going to turn it over to Ron to talk us through some of the unique things that should be considered for the different platforms.
Thank you, Anna. It's like I do appreciate being here. And I do not profess to be a professional on any of these. I've used probably half of them, but there are definitely some pros and cons of each one of them. What you want to take a look at, especially when you're looking at any type of platform, is do you have alternate text to images? You want to find out. And my recommendation is always to try these platforms out before you jump into it. One thing that I've learned when COVID hit back in March, I know that we were all scrambling. We were set up to do in-person trainings, and then when we switched into it, I did not know Zoom that well. By now, I think I'm pretty proficient at it. I've had multiple times that we've actually used it, and I know each one of you have probably used your own platforms and had figured out some things, but we've done it and I hate to say it, we've done it in a kind of a chaotic manner where we're trying to figure it out when we're doing this. And we sometimes forget about, is this accessible? Is it going to be meeting the needs? And even when Anna and I were doing, the UWASI trainings, we were like, we need to make sure that these trainings are going to be accessible for everyone. So we need to take a look at captioning, what's going to be usable. And we had to figure out, Zoom did not have captioning, or it had third-party captioning that we had to figure out. So these are some of the issues that we're going to be taking a look at. Alternate, again, text for imaging, compatibility with screen readers. Is it going to be compatible with JAWS, for example? And if you don't know that, there's, again, some different sites that you can go to learn about it. The Pacific ADA is a great spot to go into to find out exactly what do I need to have to be accessible, down to the point where even the screens that you do have, or the writing that you have on your PowerPoint. I've been to trainings where they have it in tiny, tiny, tiny little, and I can't read it. Can you imagine what it's like for somebody who has low vision or cannot see? So try to make sure that you have the text available, but screen readers, definitely important. Quick links and keyboard shortcuts, that's valuable. You don't want to have somebody that has limited mobility to try to go through. If you have a shortcut that you can link into that that platform has, so much better for you. No noise minimization, huge thing. Anna's going to be talking about some tips to have. One of them I would always recommend is to have a microphone, either through the headset. For me, I'm going to show it really quick. This is my mic. It's a blue snow, but I've tried to use the one that's in the computer. Very, very hard to hear, very hard to communicate with. And navigation issues, definitely. Is it easy for somebody to actually navigate? In the platforms that Anna shared with you, Blackboard, Blue Jean, some of these can be a little bit tough for people to navigate. And I always bring it down to, you always have three parts of a communication. You have yourself, the message, and the person who's receiving it. If the person receiving it can't access it, your message isn't going through. So you want to try to make sure that the platform you use is easy for people to actually access. Because we do talk about the digital divide. And that's not only the equipment, but it's also the information of somebody able to access it. And then if speech to text function is built in or used, you want to take a look at each one of those platforms. Slow and delayed transcription. Some of the platforms are delayed, and I'm going to touch on that really quick on some of those. And then some of them only do English only, or multiple language capability. You want to take a look at each one of those. And so I'm going to do a quick overview of each one of those little ones that we did have. But then I also want to let you know that if you go to the CADRE website, Anna, you had that all set up for you. See the positives and the negatives of each one of them. So for example, Blackboard, really quick, I want to see, because I want to make sure you're still with us too. I want to see how many people here have used Blackboard. Just raise your hand really quick if you haven't, or if you have used it. Perfect. So nobody. Okay. Liz, thank you. Liz has one person. And so Blackboard is basically a student to teacher platform. It's great to use, but it has no speech to text function. in it. And navigation on this website can be difficult for students to actually navigate through. For Blue Jean, it basically is sufficient for most users, but captioning can be delayed. You want to, again, you want to have that where it's going to be accessible for people to use it. And then Google Hangouts, it's, let's see, Google Hangouts, some of the advantages is you have live AI closed captioning available on the site and mobile. It will support up to 25 people on the calls, and there's no time limit. Disadvantages is that non-Gmail addresses can only be added to the video, and you do not have the option of adding your own captioning provider. So that's Google Hangouts. Hangouts for Google Meet with Business Google. Some of the advantages are high quality live captioning available, which I think is perfect. It does have screen reader accessibility. And then also advantages is consumers can use a full page Zoom magnifier. And again, for people who have limited visual, magnifying some of this is so important. Disadvantages are caption can only be done in English. And, we have to make sure we live in a very, very diverse community. When I was at Krill, down in not Silicon Valley, down in the Fremont area, a lot of Farsi speakers. And so you want to have this access to your whole community. And if you record a video, captions are not recorded. And so you're not going to be able to share those caption transcriptions on the Google Hangout business platform. And some of us have used software teams. I'll tell you, when I used software teams, it was part of a group. I was able to use it, not a problem. The second time I used it, I had a problem with my microphone. So with any one of the technologies, you want to make sure that, again, you're going to be working with other teams, other groups, panels. You want to have them knowledgeable about the platform that you're using. And again, some of the advantages of Microsoft Teams, live captions are available on desktop, screen reader accessible, good picture, good sound quality, simple use interface, and supports up to 250 callers. So that's perfect. Disadvantages are live captioning is also only in English. And so we have to make sure that we have these access, if you're thinking about just hearing or visual, language is a big barrier for a lot of our community members. So you want to have that accessible for different languages. And let me see, and Skype. We've all used Skype in the past. Some advantages are it's free, which we love. There's a live AI closed caption available on the desktop, screen reader accessible, which is perfect, and supports up to 50 callers. Disadvantages are this. Users must pay for a premium like voicemail, SMS, texting, making calls to the online. And so there may be a cost to that. And you do not have an option of adding your own caption provider to the call. So some different disadvantages to that. Skype for Business supports up to 250 callers. Closed captions can be enabled in Skype, meeting a broadband. Disadvantages are it's not compatible with users' consumer version Skype. So, which is weird because you have Skype for business and then Skype for your personal. You can't transfer that. Also, the user interface is difficult to use. So just be aware of that. WebEx, for example, there's another site that you can use. Some of the advantages are WebEx means can be automatically detect background noise and remove distractions, which is really nice. Because if you have a barking dog, a crying child, like we've all had, it will actually take that out. So it's a lot easier to hear the presenter. You can also, there's nothing to install or download. To join, you just join through Chrome, internet browser, whatever it is, whatever platform you or browser you have, you can still join in. Some of the disadvantages of this, it's limited screen reader support, and also no live captioning available. So those are some really drawbacks that you might have for WebEx. For Zoom, which, okay, really quick, I just got to find out how many people have actually used Zoom. I want to see a thumbs up. Come on, I want to make sure you're still alive here. Great. Okay, so most of us are using Zoom. Thank you. And we all know Zoom, it's very easy to use. Some of the advantages of Zoom is accessible with screen reader, which I think that's one of the reasons why we're using it. And it can support up to 100 people. Again, this is on the free version of it. If you have the pay version, you can go way above, and we all have done that. And then you can also, if you want to, if you have a, what is it, an interpreter, sign language, you can actually pin them so you can see their version, their picture, and you can follow along with that. And also you can have phone calls. Some people calling in instead of actually using the computer makes it a lot easier for some of our folks. Disadvantages are no live caption available, but I'm hearing that Zoom is actually trying to get that in there. And if anybody have heard that Zoom has it now, please let me know. I want to stay on contact with that. And then closed caption must be enabled in meeting setting before the actually meeting starts. So just know you have that as well. So go ahead, Anna.
I'm going to jump in because what you're seeing is the new Zoom live transcription at the bottom of our screen. So that was an enhancement. And kind of along that same lines, Marcia's telling us, we know technology changes very quickly, day to day. Google Meets now supports captions in French, German, Portuguese, and Spanish as of December 15th.
Wow.
So these platforms are, rapidly trying to also meet the needs of our communities, which is super wonderful. Valerie from Cal OES has put in the chat, Skype does not work on Chromebooks. So caution for those of you using Chromebooks. That's a negative. And Liz Dietz says Teams is required by Red Cross. So again, as you have different requirements for your organizations and your places of business, you have to kind of work through those and see what you can do to add on. Let's keep going, Ron. I think you have one more slide.
Yeah. And so these are other, I know I'm running short on my time too. So I'm just going to make sure that you do have these items for video calling. Again, Facebook Messenger is a great thing. FaceTime, again, for all those Apple users, it's always good to have. WhatsApp is another app that you can possibly use. Google Duo is available on Android devices as well. And then live transcription, live caption is a great thing to go through. Roger Voice, I have not used. And so if anybody has feedback on that, please put it in chat. Google Live Transcribe, definitely good. Otter, we do like. We've used it in the past, and it does pretty well as far as the transcribe and captioning. Just Press app is definitely it's an Android site that you can app that you can tap into. And then voice amplifiers, Google Sound Amplifier for Androids, definitely use. Hear You Now for iOS, Apples, and USound app too for iOS as well. And so, and I think I went over a little bit, but I'm going to ship it back to you. Sorry about that.
No worries. We also had here in the corner some sound amplifiers on this slide of some different software recommendations or considerations for sound amplifiers. So we'll keep going. All of these slides are also already posted to the CADRE website, and you can download the presentation immediately after today's session. So going forward, we want to reiterate a couple of things that Sherry talked about. Tips for better video calls. Remove as much background noise as you possibly can. When you're using a live caption service, speak clearly and with a natural flow. The technology is kind of designed to support you in that way. If you have one person that relies on live captions, it's a good idea to ask everyone to turn them on. And that way you can also see how well it's capturing the words being spoken in the program for those that are following with the transcription. If possible, use an external mic. Make sure you have a good internet connection. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, well, actually, I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. The use of headsets and headphones was mentioned. Ask everyone to mute your mics when not speaking. Take your call in a well-lit environment, just as Ron held up on his screen what he's using for a microphone. I'll hold up, if you can see, a little ring light. That's a way that you can increase the lighting when you're doing a video call to let that facial recognition go. Digital phone services often have a higher quality, and I thought this was interesting as we were doing our research. Your mobile service at either 4G or 5G is often better than your home Wi-Fi. So if you are struggling with your internet stability for video calls and you are fortunate enough to have an unlimited data plan, you might consider connecting your device to your mobile service, because sometimes that has a little more consistent service. So those are just a couple of tips we wanted to pass along to you as part of today's program. And raise the question, what are you using? Put in to the chat box if you have additional insights or inputs to share. I am seeing a few things coming up in the chat box, and if we have not talked about a program that you are curious about, or you came to today's program wanting to hear more and you still have a question, please put that in the chat box, because we're going to loop back to questions in a little bit. At this point in today's program, I want to introduce a speaker who's here to share with us some thoughts from the consumer perspective on this issue. Christine Fitzgerald has been active in the disability community since birth. She was born with her cerebral palsy, and glaucoma showed up later in life. She earned her Bachelor's of Arts in English from San Jose State University and worked in the nonprofit sector for over 30 years for social justice organizations such as Silicon Valley Independent Living Center, the YWCA, Project Hired, and a number of other independent living centers. Christine has worked she's currently a community advocate for our local independent living center for the last 4 years. And her goal is to make as much of the world accessible for all people with disabilities in as many ways as can be done. And so, Christine, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'm so sorry I wasn't able to join by Zoom, but like we all know, modern technology sometimes gets in the way. So I had to call in today. So I will first start out with a description of myself. So I'm a middle-aged white woman, shaggy, sandy hair, short, blue eyes, glasses, wearing disability pride t-shirt, since I'm not on screen. So let's go over a little bit about what I've experienced, and certainly what I've had to do today is no exception. One of the reasons that I was having trouble trying to log into Zoom was the added security feature. It's different than calling it because I was able to use the one-tap mobile feature and just hit one button and on we go. One thing that I will emphasize is that when you are, if you are the one creating the one tap, please be sure to put in at least 2 to 3 commas after the number, the phone number, and the access code number. And then the pound sign at the end of all that. The reason is you're giving the system a pause, a chance to catch up and say, oh, I've got a phone number, and then, oh, look, I have a password. To not do this, it may consider it all one word, all one number, and you may not get anywhere. So, sort of that is a major part of the process. I'd also like to talk about the difference between speech to text and text to speech. So speech to text is what I use if I am trying to use my computer and enter information on the screen without using the keyboard, which I have done many a time. It makes it possible for me to verbalize what I'm thinking and get it down fast and a lot more accurately than I can with my hands. Although I am a hunt and peck kind of person, sometimes I need that speed. Text to speech, on the other hand, takes the information that's on the screen and reads it to me. And because I have low vision, this is how the majority of the time I do things. And people don't quite understand why this is, why it is that, first of all, that I do need it, because I do have some vision, and they're still thinking of me as having perfect vision. Well, that disappeared a long time ago. So I've had to adapt. And one of the things that I picked up, and since I am an Apple, and in my case, an iMac or primary iPad user, pretty exclusively for both work and home, I use VoiceOver, which is the iOS and Apple all the way through their universe text-to-speech screen reading software. It's automatic. Once you turn it on, it's automatic. You set it up and you let it go. So please be aware of the differences in speech to text and text to speech. Looking at on-screen content for a minute. Now, again, for me, I'm using my ears, and for somebody who is using their eyes, having open-faced fonts like sans serif, Arial, or the like at 14 point or better makes it far easier. Remembering that if you're using a skinny script, you may want to increase what is called the kerning, which is kind of pushing the word out so there's a little bit more space between the letters. I'd also like to say that it does help actually if you don't use fonts that have tails on them, as this does create problems for screen readers. Certainly, the process of getting online is a challenge, and even viewing things online on Meaning, I should say, is a challenge. But so is looking at text or added information that, and you may have said beforehand, please, again, use large fonts, smooth fonts, high contrast, white on black, black on white, alt text if you're doing something online, which gives some kind of indication as to what's on the screen. So in other words, if you have a picture of a tree with a bird in it, and the bird is something of importance to whatever it is you're trying to say, then go ahead and emphasize it. But if it's not, then maybe you just want to emphasize there was a tree in the background. Okay? Be choosy at what you point out to the reader, because let's face it, it is a reading process. You're just using your ears. And then make it available for anyone. Certainly, as we look at online content, we also want to look at describing what's on the screen. So again, not only do you have what you may have on the web page or on a printout, making it fully accessible for somebody using a screen reader. Describing what's on the screen, especially if you have a lot of graphs or a lot of information in the data entry format, you're going to want to come up with a way of describing what's on the screen so it's useful, but not overwhelming. Just recently, I got off a meeting where somebody was literally reading line by line, word for word, an Excel file, which had a lot of different information, and it was getting really tiring, frankly, because there was so much information. Coming up with easy and simple ways of describing what's on the screen, again, should be a way of re-emphasizing what it is you're trying to get across, but not to the point where it's slowing the conversation or the presentation down. That is going to be of major importance. So looking at the difference between phone versus tablet or computer, each one of these has a challenge in and of itself. Certainly when I'm on the phone like I am now, having that one-tap mobile access code is extremely useful, but it's not the only thing that makes the process run a lot smoother. Having the knowledge of how to mute and unmute, and then if it's not done automatically from the system and you're providing the words, then please make sure that happens at the very beginning of the meeting and maybe a few times throughout the meeting, just to remind people where they are and what's happening. Certainly looking at the text or computer or a tablet or a computer, that's different in and of itself because both systems are very different. In my case, my world is all things Apple, okay? That's how I was raised. I was raised on using an Apple. And when I had better vision, I actually, in fact, taught computers when I did my first term at SVCN. But now that the vision has changed, it's a lot easier for me to access the world strictly through Apple products. But there's here too, this is a different animal. Tablets work with apps, where computers obviously work with the more robust full programs. Okay? But each one has their quirks. If it's a third-party app for Apple or Google or whoever, the screen reader may or may not be able to fully access that app. That should be taken into consideration. Now, everybody here has specified that taking time for yourself is of tremendous importance. However, it should also be noted that lived experience should also come into play. So contacting someone and having someone on your team that truly understands disability, and who better than the person with the disability to answer whatever questions you might have, is going to be of significant importance. And the more robust and the more integrated this whole system is, the better off everything will be. And adding that much more workability, doability for everybody should be the end goal. It shouldn't just be a meeting, it should be a meeting for everybody. And what better way than to involve the community around you? So let's see, what else? Oh, okay. So I want to take a slight step back and talk a little bit about having strobes or anything flashing. Like Sherry had mentioned, that it's going to be really important not to have that. But I also like to add one other layer that it just occurred to me. Also considering folks that have ADD or ADHD, having a simple background and no competing visual information is going to help folks again focus on what it is you're trying to say. So having simple, easy to read slides with maybe a picture or two and some text, but really honing in on your message and being able to vocalize your message as well as visually emphasize what you're trying to say. But again, remembering not to have too much in the way of, I'll call it white noise in the background that could interfere with somebody's understanding. And also doing the same process for it's going to be distracted by my voiceover. Sorry, guys. Where they want to go? Hold on one second. Oh, that's right. Again, making sure that your videos, whatever video you choose to show, is accessible for all, and doesn't distract or cause a seizure. That covers a lot of what I want to say. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you so much, Christine. I want to call out a couple of things that have been happening in the chat box for the participants that do not have that window open. A couple of things. Marcia has offered up some information about Otter AI and that it's free for up to 40 minutes. CADRE was paying $30 a month for Otter, and she called the company and asked about paying for a year for Otter for Business and told them we were a nonprofit, and they charged us $119 for the year, which was half price. So, and also within Otter, you can actually add vocabulary and names of people to help with some of that transcription. So don't hesitate to ask some of these companies, if you are a nonprofit, call them up and talk to their customer service and see if they offer any discounts. The other comment, Christine, for you is Valerie Mihanovich said, thank you, Christine, for making the point about ADD and ADHD. It's so true, and I need to remember that. I wanted to also suggest or make a request to the group, ask a question. One of Christine's points was about involving the community around you. And we had a submission as part of our registration for today's program that was an interesting ask that I want to put out to everyone today, which is anybody interested in having, forming some kind of practice groups to help you become more proficient in the use of some of these different tools and apps and resources? And if you are, you can put that in the chat, or you can just simply email us after today's session And as CADRE, we're open to hosting some maybe open forums where you can try some different things or connect you with folks that might be willing to help you test out systems. I know Christine was invaluable to us in testing our registration for today's program, testing some of our Zoom features, and unfortunately, we weren't able to debug the Zoom challenge that she did today. So that was a new one for us. So if you want to have an opportunity for some practice groups, please let us know. And the other is a question I'm going to direct at Sherry that came in through our registration system. And let me just read you the question, Sherry. Should it be asked if there are needed accommodations at the meeting invitation when it's sent, or is the onus on the individual to make the request for needed accommodations like translators or closed captioning? And what's the reasonable amount of time to take for those requests?
So this is Sherry. Great question. It is recommended that when you are sending out meeting announcements or invitations or even a flyer, save the date, to give as much notice as possible in mentioning that your meeting will be made accessible to everyone who is interested in participating to the best of your ability, and that you want to provide access, accommodations, and alternative formats, as well as interpreter services if necessary. So you can put that statement at the bottom of your invitation. I know it went out on our invitation that Anna had sent out, is that we asked for 5 days, which is typically a good standard to say that we would like 5 days notice, or give a specific deadline in your announcement requesting for any needed accommodations to be requested by such and such a date. But 5 days is a typical amount of time, which also means that you need to get out your announcement with plenty of time for the folks to be able to respond. So that's the standard there. The onus then is put on the individual participants who are registering for the event to ask what type of accommodations they specifically need. And we did have at least one request that came in from a participant asking for transcription services, either live by a human person transcribing the information that's being shared, or through AI, which is what we're using today with 2 different versions, one that's built in with Zoom and the other, as you know, with Otter AI.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Christine, we also have a question in chat, actually from Marcia, saying when you were mentioning backgrounds in like PowerPoint slides, does that also translate over for video conferencing to presenter backgrounds? Some of us, and I'll raise my hand, I've got kind of a graphic logo behind my head. Does that present challenges that we should be conscious or aware of?
I would think so. It would also depend on the actual graphic. If it's too busy. So, for instance, think of this is the only thing that I can think of offhand for an example. Think of the Partridge Family bus, and that kind of very busy, hectic colored scheme may cause problems for folks. So if you're able to have a quiet background, if you will, where you may have a logo, but a simple screen behind it, that'd be fantastic. I was also going to mention something else, but right now I can't think of it. I was bouncing off Sherry's comments. I'm going to think about that and come back.
Okay, and you're also getting another shout out from the Voter Accessibility Advisory Committee with the Registrar of Voters. We love Christine's input. So there you go. More fans for you, Christine. Okay,
No, I know that. Exactly.
We're starting to run a little bit short on time, so if folks do have questions and you'd like to either raise your hand in the participant window, and Marcia and I are scanning for any raised hands if you want to come off mute and ask your question live, or if you'd like to put something in the chat box as either an additional insight, question, or input to share, please feel free to do so. We do have some folks that have indicated an interest in practice opportunities. So Marcia and I will take that under request, and we'll see if we can put some things together in the new year. Someone's asking, what does the Zoom live captioning cost? It was not an additional feature if you're using a paid Zoom Pro account. You simply find it in what Sherry said. In your account settings, there's something called accessibility in your Zoom account meeting settings, and you literally just toggle on the switch for live captioning. It's a new service. It only came on board or became live earlier this month in December. Okay. Sherry is putting up, there's that background noise of my dog. Sherry put in the chat box, the Santa Clara County AFN sub work group is open and for anyone interested in improving access to everyone in our county, and to please email her at sherryb@svilc.org. They meet monthly on the fourth Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat box at this time, so I am going to turn the program over to Marcia for a few closing comments.
Thank you. What a great presentation. I learned a lot. I hope everyone did, and I'm going to have to play it back again for sure to make sure I got it all. For those of you that are on the call, if you could please fill out our survey. It's really important for us to get feedback and to show if you love us or if you want us to improve, because we do get to do trainings through grants. So we need to show that people think that the trainings are valuable. If you want to go to the survey right off your screen, you can get on your smartphone, click on the camera and hover it over that little squiggly thing that I'm sure is terribly difficult to look at if you have visual impairment, but it will scan and take you straight to the survey. And if that doesn't work for you, we are going to email you the survey as well. So if you could just please, oh, and it's in the chat, so no excuse at all. Please fill it out today. And let's see. I know I really appreciate that you're all on this call. When we said we were going to do it on December 21st, if it had been any other year, this would have been a terrible day. But because it's COVID, we had 60 people on the call. So we just appreciate you being here. We appreciate everything that you're doing. And I want to wish you all a happy holidays.
And a big thank you to our presenters today as well. Thank you.
Yes.
And Roxy, Sherry, Ron, Christine. We really appreciate all the efforts you guys put in. And on that note, thank you.